they're sending, they call us Y operators by the letter Y. They send them to sea to listen on enemy frequencies, particularly aircraft, to see if they're going to attack you, to listen to the aircraft frequencies who are coming in to attack. He said, would you like to train for that? I said, very much. So by then I was a leading hand, you see, so I trained for this, taught by an Air Force bloke who taught me Japanese air, which was the same speed as this stuff, some of it a bit slower, but far less symbols in it. And the bombers used Morse, and the fighters used speech, you know, like our people did. And I was taught this, and then I had 6 ratings, and this is what I like. We took our sets, we took the code books, we took coders. One of them was a Canadian Red Indian. If you know anything about this, they used Red Indians because many of them had a little local language that nobody else knew, and they could speak plain text over the air, and no one else could understand it other than a Cherokee Indian or someone with black feet or whatever. And this fellow was a Canadian, and he may have got in that way, but he was my coder. And we were sitting off the coast of Burma getting ready for a landing. The Japanese were this time on the retreat, and they were coming down through the Arakan. And the idea was to land a force of Marines on a couple of islands, Chiduba and Ramri, which you can see on the map there. And we lay off there bombarding without any air cover at all. I was in a cruiser at the time, HMS Ceylon, and we were just listening on the air frequencies where attack would likely to come from. And by this time, being a good boss, I'd got myself out of a job, you know. The idea that, I mean, not for being lazy, but if you're trying to organise something, you try to organise yourself out of work so you can be everywhere at once if you need it. And I'd organised this situation. But I had a set that I just used to listen on and flick across on search. Now this old receiver, the HRO, had 13 plug-in coils, and it covered from low frequency right up to about 30 megs. It was a ham receiver made by the National Company of America with big plug-in coils you pushed in the front. And there were these 13 coils in a box and this receiver. And where was I going to search? I'd been given no frequencies to look at. So I just plugged in and I started swishing the dial like this. And it nearly blew my ears off. It was Kana, but it wasn't air, and it wasn't Navy, so you didn't have to be brilliant to think that it might be Army. But the stuff was in plain text. It wasn't coded at all. It was in plain text. And the only thing I remember when I wrote this down all those years ago was this particular Kana. I'm going to say that again, I'm bad tonight. And all of it came out in Kana like that. And I transposed it. And that is Tongutupu. If you go back to the map, Tongu. So it was right inland from where we were. So I gave this to the civilian, a fellow used to live in Crosby, an Air Force bloke. Officer he was, a pilot officer. And he said, you know what this is? I said, no. He said, it's the Army calling for their equivalent of MTBs to come and investigate units of the British fleet who were bombarding prior to a landing. We had no air cover. Well, we could only give the message to the Admiral. If you read, there's another book that I've read some time ago called Bodyguard of Lies, and they were so secretive, you know how terribly secretive the English are, that even the captain of the ship wasn't told. There were people on the list who could be told. And I was telling both earlier on that wherever we sailed is where the Admiral flew his flag. So we had to ring the bridge and tell the Admiral. And it was rather nice if you were a leading telegraphist. You know, you rang the bridge, and they actually spoke like this. You say, hello, bridge here. Right, isn't it? Just like that. And I said, may I speak to Admiral Cunningham, please? Who's that? I just said, why? Why service? Oh, hang on, why? You see, like that. And Cunningham comes up, and say, Admiral Cunningham, you know, leading flag of Kendick Y service, we just intercepted a message that Rangoon is sending up a fleet of MTBs to investigate us. Oh, thank you, Y. Carry on, you see. That's all he said. And I said, what's he going to do about it, you know? What's he going to do? What's he going to do about it? And I'm reminded of a tale. One of my friends, Jimmy Morris, now sadly no longer with us, a real Burconian, and he was an ASDIC operator, ping boy they used to call them, didn't they? And they'd listen on these phones and they'd send a sounding down to pick up subs. And if there's nothing there, the sound wave went down to the bottom of the ocean and came back and go ping, and then the reflection, ping. But if they hit anything, the distance was less, so it comes back quicker. Ping, and he's listening. Ping, 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 ping. Submarine, sir, port quarter, 2 miles, closing. Righto, Asdick, carry on. Ping, 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 ping. Submarine, sir, port quarter, 1 mile, closing. Righto, Asdick, carry on. Ping, ping, ping. Submarine, sir, port quarter, 500 yards, closing. Drop a depth charge, I'll pay for it. Actually, this business of, righto, carry on, it was exactly the right thing to do. Exactly. The idea was to stop panic. Okay, lads, we're all right, we'll take care of that. And they did. They just up-duked and buggered off. Left the Marines ashore. They were all right. They'd got ashore. The landing was largely unopposed. And about 15 years ago, I told that story somewhere in Lancs, St. Helens, I think, I'm not sure. And the guy at the back stood up and he said, yes. He said, I was on Ramree. He was actually at the actual business there. So that was an interesting one. And this sort of thing went on until eventually we were walking across the parade ground and we heard about Hiroshima. And I turned to my oppo, as we used to call them in the Navy, a radio ham today, Frankie Fennell, and we heard that it was an atomic bomb. And I can remember as a kid at school reading that if the energy in the atom could be released, a thimbleful of coal would drive the Queen Mary across the Atlantic. That's the way they put it in those days. So we had an idea of what this immense power was. We knew nothing about radiation, who did? But we were quite shocked by it. And a few days later, I was sent for, on my own, packed my bags, no sets, nothing, fly up to Trincomalee. Flew up to Trincomalee, got there, went aboard HMS Queen Elizabeth, and she, with some escorts, sailed right down the Malacca Strait. Right down the Malacca Strait, and lay off Singapore. By this time, there was no Japanese resistance at all. All the aircraft were destroyed or damaged. They'd lost most of their fleet. There was no chance at all. They were finished. And we lay off, and there was Hiroshima, and I was taken down to the wireless room and asked to call up to Singapore. They set the transmitter up on the frequency. What would it be, about 5 kilowatts on a battle wagon like the Queen Elizabeth? About 5 kilowatts. And we were laying a couple of miles offshore. And Singapore was in a two-way with Tokyo. And I sat down at the key, never touched a key in my life, hadn't been taught to use one. I knew you just had to press it. And I called up very slowly in terrible Morse, I suppose, Singapore, C-bar 10-4, GZH3, I can still remember the call sign. GZH3, no answer. And they had an admiral there. Did you ever come across Hookie Walker, the fellow with the brass hook? Heard about him? Well, he's just like a Peter Pan pirate, you know, he actually had a brass hook. And he was one of these, madmen, you know. And we thought, God, the war's over, you know, we go back, I'll see my girlfriend again, you know, marvellous, see my mum, see my dad. And they sort of saying, have they answered? Have they answered? I said, no, sir, they're having a little difficulty. 5 kilowatts. And we were in sight. They could have got us on a piece of coal and wet string, you know, literally, they could. But Singapore wasn't acknowledging, but Tokyo did. Tokyo acknowledged, radioed back to Singapore to say, acknowledge GZH3. So we sent the doings. And the rest of it, if you saw the life story of Mountbatten on television, you could see them coming out. They had Korean guards, you know, because they were tall, and they're brass. And they came aboard the Queen Elizabeth. The surrender wasn't signed there, but the start of it was started there. And then off they went, and we turned and steamed home. It's 3 days steaming back to Trinco. We were flown down to the base, and we got down there. So I've been away about 3.5, 4 days. So that I wonder what the lads will be doing now. There's no Japanese left to listen to. They're finished. Went in expecting them all to find them lying on the bed, you know, or playing cards or something. No sign. All the watches were going. I said, where's the lads? He said, they're all listening to the Russians. And that's when I lost my interest in naval intelligence. We'd been thinking, this is the war, there won't be any more after this. Already the seeds of what we've now got were being sown. Having said that, they were listening to us, the Yanks were listening to us, we were listening to the Yanks, the French, everybody listens to everybody else. And it's going on now, and it's an open secret. I'm not telling you anything that isn't known. You can read it in a lot of books. So I came away quite disgruntled, and that was the end of that. There's one little incident that I forgot to mention, which I think is worth talking to you about. We thought we were rather privileged, you know. It's very difficult for a teenager to be put in a position like this without assuming some importance that they don't really possess. The war was won by people who fought and died